যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. Today I will take you down a trip my memory lane and make you listen to the first two Sanjeev Sanyal interviews I ever saw in my life. So the story goes that I came across his name in the Indian Libertarians discussion group on Facebook, and someone was discussing some nuts and bolts reforms that Sanjeev Sanyal had done. There was a Facebook post by Sanjeev Sanyal that they shared and were discussing in positive light, and I was blown out of my mind. And I thought, who the fuck is this Bengali guy discussing free market and non-socialist stuff? How is it even possible? Is this some NRI author guy? Because maybe they are the only ones left, who Bengalis who have some brains left, perhaps. I had no idea who he was. So then I search about this guy, find him on YouTube, and this is the first interview I come across. This is from 3 years ago, not 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago. Yeah. So March 2021, Shekhar Gupta is interviewing him for the print. And then we'll check out another interview by him, also taken by Shekhar Gupta, but actually before this one. But this one was the first one I ever saw. That's why I'm excited about this. And here he talks about history and stuff. He says that I'm not a libertarian, but I do believe in small government, and I refuse to believe that sarkar ko kuch karna is the right thing to do. And I'm immediately blown away by those statements, and therefore I go ahead and buy his books. Land of Seven Rivers and 2008 book. Land of Seven Rivers actually came in a box set and stuff. And that's how then I start coming across to the Indian right-wing side and start believing that, yes, India does have great people and India used to have great people and stuff. Abstract is asking, how did you become a libertarian though? By listening to Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Thomas Sowell and stuff, 2018 onwards. Before you start, an off-topic question: does FLSE files sound any different on ordinary earphone, or it's just for pro? No. FLSE will see. Actually, the FLSE does have a different sound. Now, if your headphone is above, let's say 1,500 rupees and stuff, then you should notice the difference. If you are a hardcore music listener, like you listen to music about 10-15 hours a day while doing everything or the other, if you listen to music, you might be able to notice the sound. I can in my headphones, of course they are pro audio headphones and studios, but I think you should be able to find the difference between MP3 and FLSE even on cheaper headphones and consumer grade headphones.
The coronavirus is staging a comeback, but some of us are being adventurous, some because we've tasted the virus already, as my guest today, Sanjeev Sanyal, and some in my vintage because we've been vaccinated at least once, and also it's outdoors. So it's probably...
And these are the interviews where I realized even how much libertarian even Shekhar Gupta is. He's staunchly against povertarianism. He's the one who coined the term povertarianism.
Safer, and we don't have an audience, but this is the next best thing we can do to recording and off the cuff with an audience, because our audience has sent us questions. So we'll be asking many of them. So Sanjeev Sanyal, Principal Economic Advisor and a thinking young man.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to Off the Cuff. And if we start talking about all these areas of your specialization, that'll take a long time. And I think for each one, we'll have to have a different session, because you are working on the economy now, but you think about urban governance. That's one of your favorite areas. And
Yeah, he has served on the urban planning department of the Singapore government while being a global strategist for Deutsche Bank, and while also taking a black belt in Taekwondo, and while also having getting a training license. He's completed his training in rowing. Not actually rowing. The term is something else. Kayaking and stuff. Yes, that's the thing.
and also archaeology and history. So maybe we'll dabble in a little bit of that. But let's first ask some philosophical questions. And it's interesting that I asked you this question sitting in a little zone in Delhi, which in my sort of irreverential moments, which are most of my moments, I call it the new Kremlin, because this is new Moti Bagh, which was built for government officers. Also young officers like you. And this park is called amphitheater. So you can see that when the state wants to do something well, they do it really well, because this is a top class colony, maybe the best in Delhi.
क्योंकि ये तो खुद के लिए है भाई, यहाँ पे तो अकाउंटेबिलिटी होगा ही.
So why is it so that the state and the economy?
Arey Divya, come on. RFK Jr. is not anti that thing. If I pronounce that word, I might get demonetized on thing. I shouldn't even take his name probably, but that guy is not anti that thing. He just asks for actual testing. Most of those things which you have to take 72 of by the time you grow up to be an adult in the USA are not tested. They have never been tested. And even in terms of the 2020 virus thing, for that thing, even that, all those people who are being accused of being anti that thing, they were asking their parents to take that. They just thought they don't have to take that, because if they are under 30 or work out really hard and stuff, are actually fit and stuff, they did not have taken that. And their parents were the ones who needed that. And more importantly, some people passed away even after taking that thing, even if they were under 30 and stuff, because of just genetic problems. And like if your mother had 10 miscarriages before giving you birth, and if she was in her 40s, then yeah, you are probably dead today because of that virus. So this is not that anti-thing lobby. So I am in favor of them.
Run sort of contradictory to each other.
Well, I think that goes to the nub of what do we want our state to do? So, unfortunately, when we talk about the Indian state, obviously we have all various visions of what it should be doing. But at least in my view, we've got ultimately to be very clear about what this Indian state will do. And I think it should be basically a limited but strong state.
वो भी क्या दिन थे. और आज हमने अभी जस्ट प्रीवियस लाइव स्ट्रीम में जो पढ़ा है, एक न्यूज़ के रॉयटर्स से आया है कि गवर्नमेंट हैज ऑफिशियली गिवन अप ऑन प्राइवेटाइजेशन प्रीटी मच.
So let me contrast it with the Nehruvian idea of a sort of soft, all-pervasive but weak state.
That's the Ashokan state.
That's the Ashokan state, which, and I write
I know,
quite
yes.
a lot of.
You write that Ashoka laid out everything on an edict.
Yeah.
Brush your teeth. I mean, I'm simplifying it. Brush your teeth in the morning, wake up at this time, sleep at this time.
And you have a Dharma Mahamanta, the religious police who will make sure that you do such thing.
Absolutely.
Because just like a parent hands over her children to a wet nurse, so Ashoka handed over his subjects to the Dharma Mahamanta.
So that's the Mai Baap Sarkar, classical Mai Baap Sarkar.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the problem here is that we have imbibed this to such an extent that we want the state to do all these things. It is so. I think in the end, we, the people of India, have got to accept that the state has a role to play. I am not a libertarian by any means. I believe that the state is needed.
I like this. He at least acknowledged that word He at least said that yes, I mean, at least they exist and they have this view. I'm not there as of yet. I'm not that far off on the right, but at least yes, there is something called libertarianism.
But the state has to be limited to doing certain things. It should provide defense, it should provide municipal governance, it should perhaps enforce contracts, not the government, but the judiciary, justice, things like this, which clearly the market cannot deliver. For all other things, we have got to allow the rest of the system to do it, private sector, civil society, whatever it is. And the state has got to take the view that in its own purview, it delivers the goods. For the rest of society has to also pull along. But unfortunately, this "Mai Baap Sarkar" idea is now so well ensconced in our, I think, our bloodstream, that whenever something goes wrong, oh my God, the government must intervene and do.
Sarkar ko kuch karna chahiye. This was one of the reasons I got hooked onto Sanjeev Sanyal. Because by the time I listened to this interview, I was already a libertarian, right? So I always noticed about this thing about Indian society, and it was always going around in my mind. And I was complaining to myself all the time that why do people behave like this? That whenever a problem arises, everyone says, "Sarkar ko kuch karna chahiye. Sarkar ne ye kyun nahi kiya? Sarkar ne wo kyun nahi kiya? Sarkar ko kuch karna chahiye." This is the most famous sentence in Indian history, in Indian political history, post-independence political history. And he says that exact phrase in English, basically paraphrasing me. And that was so nice. But right now, I'm going to read you all a piece of news that's going to be very relevant to this particular interview we are looking at, okay? Because a news has come about from Reuters. Check this out. This is going to be fun. I just read this out in the last live stream. I'm going to do it again because a lot of people are joining in this one. They didn't check out the last one, and it's very relevant. Check out this news. This interview of Sanjeev Sanyal was in 2021, and this is in 2025. Exclusive. India to ditch privatization plans, pour billions in state-run firms, sources say. Summary: India planning to pour in $230 million to $350 million in ailing Pawan Hans. Government announced $1.3 billion plan to revive steel producer. Privatization plans of 9 steel state-run firms on hold, according to document. Government mopped up $998 million via stake sales in 2024-2025. Now, let me give you a bit of more of a context. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is pouring billions into ailing state-run firms after slowing ambitious divestment plans that were intended to reduce the role of the state in business, according to government sources and a document reviewed by Reuters. Less than a month into 2025, New Delhi has plans to invest about $1.5 billion in financial rescue packages for 2 state-owned firms after failing to sell them to private companies. I can't help it if Reuters is a bit dicey, because the people who are not dicey are not going to cover this stuff. Only, I guess, Divya Jain still criticizes the government from the right on economics. It has also decided to put in abeyance privatization of at least 9 state-owned units after opposition from relevant ministries, according to a document that detailed recommendations of a government panel set up to identify privatization candidates. The document reviewed by Reuters did not cite reasons for the decision. The 9 companies include Madras Fertilizers, Fertilizer Corp of India, MMTC, and NBCC. Housing and Urban Development Corp, that was also identified for privatization, has now been exempted, implying it will not be sold, according to the document. Among the state-owned companies being revived with government funding is helicopter operator Pawan Hans. The government is planning to infuse around $230 to $350 million in Pawan Hans to modernize its aging fleet of helicopters after 4 failed attempts to sell the company, to government sources said. The amount of infusion is still being finalized, as the options being considered for fleet modernization include both outright acquisition and leasing, one of the sources say. The sources declined to be identified because of the sensitivity of the issue. India's finance and civil aviation ministries did not immediately reply to emails seeking comment on the privatization plans or on the Pawan Hans investment. The fund infusion in Pawan Hans and plans to halt the privatization of 9 firms have not been previously reported. In 2021, Modi's government announced a major program to privatize most of India's state-run companies. The plan was so drastic that even in the four sectors that India sees as sensitive, such as telecoms and banking, it wanted to keep only a minimum presence while exiting from all other sectors. But now it is planning rescue and revival plans for companies even outside the sensitive sectors. Last week, the government announced a $1.3 billion plan to revive debt-laden steel producer Rashtriya Ispat Nigam Limited. The government has also allocated 80 billion rupees in 2024-2025 for bond repayments of state-run telco MTNL that has seen a series of defaults lately, according to budget documents for the current year. 4 years since the privatization policy was announced, the Modi government has had only three successes, out of which Air India's sale to the Tata Group was the largest. The other two were indirect holdings in steelmaker Nilachal Ispat Nigam Limited to Tata Steel and Ferroscrap Nigam to Konoike Transport Company. Other large sales have either been deferred or delayed. The U-turn in policy was partly driven by the expectation that some large state-owned firms could be overhauled and made more profitable, helping the government earn dividend income, Reuters has reported previously. Political pressures on Modi have increased after he came back to power in mid-2024 only with the help of regional allies, making it more difficult to overcome opposition to privatization by employee unions fearing job losses. Fearing, डर लग रहा है भाई, जॉब चला जाएगा, इसलिए ऐसा कुछ यूनियन बाजी करते हैं जिससे जॉब बिल्कुल ही चले जाए और किसी को भी ना मिले. The sale of state refiner Bharat Petroleum Corp was rolled back in 2022 after failing to get suitors. कोई खरीदना ही नहीं चाहता है. The ongoing privatization of Shipping Corp of India and BEML has been stuck for years due to complications over transfer of land holdings. The government has also been dragging its feet on the sale of a majority stake in IDBI Bank. In previous years, privatization formed an important part of the government's plan to reduce its budget gap, but with the federal fiscal deficit seen falling to a more comfortable 4.9% of GDP in the 2024-2025 year, the fiscal push for divestment has waned. कि चलो थोड़ा deficit कम हुआ है तो फिर से deficit बढ़ा लेते हैं, क्या problem है? New Delhi is expected to miss its internal stake sale target of 180 billion to 200 billion rupees in 2024-2025 for the sixth straight year. बढ़िया है. As of January, government has mopped up 86.25 billion rupees via stake sales in 2024-2025. हो गया खबर. चलो अब लौटते हैं वहां पे जहां पे कोई आता जाता ना हो.
Has got to take the view that in its own purview, it delivers the goods. For the rest of society has to also pull along. But unfortunately, this My Baap Sarkar idea is now so well ensconced in our, I think, our bloodstream, that whenever something goes wrong, oh my God, the government must intervene and do something about it. It's not always obvious that it should.
Yeah. So Mr. Modi also, when he built his politics from 2012 onwards nationally, he promised minimum government, maximum governance. That hasn't happened in the past 6 years. And now I see a lot of emphasis on this budget, his speech in parliament, where he said you shouldn't leave everything to IAS officers. Others also, entrepreneurs also contribute. They're also working for India. And he also said that don't malign wealth creators, because unless they create wealth, what will you distribute? Now, we might have been waiting to hear this, but why has it taken this long?
So, well, my own view on this is that this is an issue of sequencing. Because if you do have, you see, minimum government also brings maximum governance. People hear only one part of it, whichever bit they like to hear, and forget the other bit. The fact of the matter is, there was a point in time when Prime Minister Modi came to power, there were all kinds of issues that were going kind of off kilter. There were serious issues about the banks, there were a series of scandals, financial scandals, corporate scandals. At that point in time, at least, there had been a series of terrorism attacks in the recent past. So there was a feeling that, first of all, some imposition of order had to be done. The second thing, which I think is also important, is that a minimum government, maximum governance system also requires that it is a system that is a system of churn, in a sense. You know, old companies die, new companies emerge. There is a lot of flexibility in the kinds of shocks from globalization are allowed to, to some degree, pass through the system. If you're going to allow that, then you do need to have some sort of a.
Yeah, Shekhar Gupta, obviously, see, that's his shtick, that's his appeal, that's the identity he wants to, that's the signal he wants to give to people, that I am the neutral guy. So he will say, sometimes he will bring on right wing people who absolutely piss the fuck out of commie minds, and then he will do the vice versa as well. That guy still has Deep Haldar on his payroll. Deep Haldar is talking on the issues that you all know about. He is still in print. So I don't see the reason for that much hate against print, and especially Shekhar Gupta.
Safety net in place in order that the general population buys into this. So this does require that you have a system of basic health insurance. You do have systems for providing direct assistance through, say, the Jan Dhan schemes. So I think the two are not contradictory. I would argue that this is a case of sequencing.
Yeah, at that point, Sanjeev Sanyal defended it by saying it's sequencing, but वो sequence का अगला चीज अभी तक नहीं आया.
Some people may have preferred that one is done faster, or
yes, you admit or you go along with the government's apologia for feasibility. That's what you will be left with. वो feasible कभी नहीं होगा unless you push it.
The sort of the minimum government part of it was done earlier in the sequence, and that's a matter of private personal taste. But I would argue that the maximum governance part, which is imposition of order and creating these channels for safety nets, was a part of the package.
So to what extent do you think is the current commitment coming from conviction, and how durable is it going to be?
Well, I think it comes from conviction. I mean, it certainly comes from, I am very much committed to it. We read all my writings and the last few economic surveys.
You also work in the system now, so you know how the system is responding.
I would argue they are. I mean, as I said, the joke used to be the economic surveys are written by the economists and nothing from the economic surveys ever gets implemented. I would argue that the last 2 or 3 economic surveys, which I have been fortunate to co-author, have had a very significant impact on what happened subsequently in policy. Whether it's in terms of arguing unapologetically for privatization.
This is what I was saying in the previous live stream. He used to say, एक हवा उठा था कि small government, maximum governance. 2021 में privatization का वो sort of memo निकलता है बीजेपी से. People start getting Indian kids start getting hooked on Ben Shapiro's the debates with commies. Thomas Sowell clips go viral, audiobooks go viral on YouTube because of staying at home all time around, all year long because of Corona. At that moment, Sanjeev Sanyal says, I will be unapologetically saying that we are privatizing. We won't use escapist words like divestment. And then 2025, Modi says, no, क्या होगा privatization करके, feasible नहीं है.
Or the farm laws or the labor laws that were done, but generally about deregulation. And I'll give an example that is a more micro example. Since the time of the East India Company, cartography and any geospatial mapping was a monopoly of the Survey of India. Now, why was it a monopoly of the Survey of India? Because during the period of British occupation, the British occupiers did not want any of the natives or any of their rivals to have good maps of this country. So naturally, they made it into a monopoly. Now, question is, why did we continue it after independence? Especially when it was quite obvious that any military use of it was quite obsolete, because everybody, I mean, from the 70s, people had satellites which were taking photographs of all military installations.
Indian Air Force has been using US Air Force maps in the Himalayas.
Absolutely. So why is it that it required you to come to 2021 when everybody already was using Google Maps illegally, technically, for us to open this up? Because there was this idea in our back of our minds that somehow the default is that the government controls it unless it opens it up. Whereas in fact, we should have the opposite view, that unless there is a overriding reason, it should be open, and only if there is an overriding reason do you control it. So
these are the basic concepts, first principles that people pretended to care about for a while in the last 3-4 years, and it's all gone to hell now.
default has always been the my baap, that daddy will allow you, then you're allowed to stay out late. So this is the fundamental problem.
And give me some more examples of things said in economic surveys which have been followed up or which have been implemented.
So, for example, one thing we talked about was taxpayers' rights. So, ironically, we have always talked about, what are the rules in the Income Tax Act, for example, are about the taxpayer, thou shalt pay on time, thou shalt do this, and thou shalt do that, all directed towards the taxpayer. What are the rights of the taxpayer vis-a-vis the tax collector? So if you notice, just about 6 months ago, we have explicitly laid out what are the rights of the taxpayer. Now, of course, the enforcement of that also requires an ombudsman system, which we are thinking about. But at least we have laid out explicitly what are the rights of the taxpayer vis-a-vis the tax collector. So I think the point being made here is that the limits of the state are also being laid out. So this is not, as I keep pointing out, this is not a case of a libertarian who wants a minimalist state or a hardcore Marxist who wants a withering away of the state.
No, but
this is not the case.
In India, in many areas where we need the state, it doesn't exist enough. We need, for example, more police. We need more judges. We need more teachers. We need more government doctors. All that is not. So, in fact, Indian state has to grow in many areas.
Absolutely right. So, if you go back to 1991, what was it about?
We need more diplomats.
I agree. So in 1991, what did we try to do? We tried to stop the government from doing the things it should not be doing.
Yeah.
And it's still incomplete business. We are still trying to get into privatization, this and that. But as we get into sort of reform 2.0, this is about trying to get the state to do the things it should be doing. And what should it be doing? It should be providing municipal governance. It should be buying better guns for its army and defending the borders in Ladakh. And it should be enforcing contracts. In fact, if you want an economy basically run by the private sector, this basically means that you're dealing with autonomous groups of people, companies, or various autonomous agents, which have various contracts with each other. It's not the state that decides through licenses or whatever how the system will work. It is run through contracts. Now, you cannot have a contract-based system where there are 37 million cases stuck in the legal system.
In fact, if you look at ease of doing business rankings, the one area in which we get spanked, in fact, we get spanked in two areas. One is construction.
We get spanked.
Permits. The second is enforcement of contracts.
Yes, and both of them are good examples of what is wrong. One of them, a construction permit, is an area where the state, obviously there's no country in the world where construction permits are randomly distributed by the market. That's something the state will have to do. There's some control will have to be imposed. And the other is enforcement of contracts that the judicial system has to enforce. Both of them are state failures. See, there's a large amount of literature that is taught in economics classes in every university in India about market failure. And indeed, there is market failure. But the fact of the matter is, an equal problem is that of state failure.
State failure, yes.
And that is unfortunately assumed not to exist.
This is another reason I liked this interview and got hooked onto Sanjeev Sanyal. He is the first one who mentioned, "Arey bhai, pura din classrooms mein market failure पढ़ाया जा रहा है. State failure का क्या? हर जगह, हर रोज, हर aspect में हम देख रहे हैं state का failure. उसका क्या? हर कुछ में evil capitalism आ जाएगा, जूजू दिखाया जा रहा है."
So I have tried very hard, in fact, to talk about state failure. If you read my economic survey, this year's economic survey has a whole chapter, I think it's chapter 6 in volume 1, on regulations. And the problem is that our entire regulatory system is based on this idea that, look, we must have regulation for every possible outcome.
Also, we make rules and laws for lawbreakers.
Yes, absolutely. So this is the same concept.
And hope that those lawbreakers don't break the 51st law. Although there are 50 laws preventing his actions already, we hope with the 51st law, the lawbreaker will finally stop breaking the law.
That, we create rules for lawbreakers. So what happens is the lawbreakers continue to not follow the law. It's the poor compliant person who has to comply with all these rules and is carrying around the weight. So this is precisely the problem. And the reason this happens is because in the back of our minds, in the end, we still have this, for economists, this is called an Arrow-Debrau model of the world, where basically the idea is that it is possible to work out what all the possible outcomes are and to work out precisely what you should do in each of those circumstances. And this is a great law in India, a great regulation in India is one where you worked out all the possible outcomes and have a protocol for each one of them. Now, in the real world, there are an infinite number of possible paths that history can take. So consequently, it is always obvious that we will end up in a situation which was not prescribed.
Yeah.
So our reaction then is to add another 5 rules to take care of those new situations. And very quickly, it becomes so unwieldy and complicated that nobody can follow any of the rules. It is actually not possible.
Oh, I love this part. Sanjeev Sanyal is about to say, I'll just show off my memory skills here, and he will say that I'm probably breaking some rule or the other by just sitting here right now talking to you. There are so many rules governing our lives.
Quickly it becomes so unwieldy and complicated that nobody can follow any of the rules. It is actually not possible to be a law-abiding citizen in this country.
Holy shit. What a quote. Oh, this is such a classic interview. This is insane stuff, this guy, this part.
Up in a situation which was not prescribed. So there's one where you worked out all the possible outcomes and have a protocol for each one of them. Now, in the real world, there are infinite number of possible paths that history can take. So consequently, it is always obvious that we will end up in a situation which was not prescribed. So all our reaction then is to add another 5 rules to take care of those new situations. And very quickly, it becomes so unwieldy and complicated that nobody can follow any of the rules. It is actually not possible to be a law-abiding citizen in this country. Because even at this point, I'm sure I am breaking some rule or the other by simply existing. So
होली शिट कहा गए वो दिन कहा गए ये डिस्कोर्स भोसड़ी वालों ने फिजिबिलिटी नहीं है फिजिबिलिटी नहीं है फिजिबिलिटी नहीं है बोल बोल के मोदी को खुली छूट दे दी बाय द वे ऋषि the space sector opening up under PMO is pretty interesting because remember everyone will admit today in India that PMO is the only department I think that really functions or at least functions pretty well. Is that the reason that they are the ones allowing the privatizations and the other departments, other ministries and other offices who run other things in the country, they are not being allowed to do privatization, or there's pushback from those departments, or they just suck at everything, therefore they are not being able to do their government job and not even being able to handle privatization? Might that be the case?
Therefore, you then create circumstances for rent seeking and other things that then come with a situation.
Yeah, because when you have systems like this, then you must have discretion also.
Absolutely.
And that. So if you were to, now it's a wider plane, and then I will come to questions from our audience and our guests.
By the way, this is something that Mystery of Sociology sent me to point out to you all. I'll just read this out from here. Wait. This is another nice thing that Narendra Modi has done. Okay, this is Narendra Modi sharing it on LinkedIn. Okay, wait, I'll just zoom in first. This is heartening to see over the okay. So I'll read the original tweet first, which Narendra Modi has shared. Okay. World Future Skills Index, UK Spotlight, QS World Future Skills Index, download now. Nunzio Quachquarelli 3 days back, 2 weeks back, has posted that by 2026, India is set to surpass Japan as the world's 4th largest economy through its Viksit Bharat 2047 initiative. The nation aims to grow real per capita income 8-fold to $20,000. Central to achieving this vision is the development of a future-ready workforce equipped with in-demand skills. The Indian government recognizes that nurturing talent and expanding skill development is vital for sustainable growth. The newly released QS World Future Skills Index highlights India's job market as one of the most prepared globally to integrate emerging skills. It is 4th best in the world in AI and green skill penetration, but flourishes even better in digital skills, where it is second only to the United States. India's thriving startup ecosystem and youthful population uniquely position it to lead in digital transformation. The index, which evaluates how 81 economies are preparing for the evolving global job market, identifies India's current strengths and strategic opportunities for future growth, etc. Let's see what Modi is saying. This is heartening to see. Over the last decade, our government has worked on strengthening our youth by equipping them with skills that enable them to become self-reliant and create wealth. We have also leveraged the power of technology to make India a hub for innovation and enterprise. The insights from the QS World Future Skills Index are valuable as we move further on this journey towards prosperity and youth empowerment. Now, Mr. Sociologist was telling me that this is important because a lot of bullshit publications in India where a bunch of retractions go on, and publications where you can just pay to get your article in, and publications which nobody gives a shit about, but you can publish there and say that yes, see, I have proven that nuclear bombs existed in Mahabharat, and I've written a paper about it, and it's a peer reviewed thing, etc. But nobody has heard of your university or your institution or the journal or the people who allegedly peer reviewed your stuff, etc. So those kinds of things are going to stop now, and there's going to be a better standard of ranking, and only the best people and with their best articles will be able to print or publish their stuff only in the best journals. No fake journals anymore. Oh, sorry, I forgot to magnify. Wait. Yeah, I closed the window. Sorry.
On a wider plane, if you were to rebuild the Indian state,
Okay.
a new social contract between Indian state, India's economy and people, what would you do?
First of all, I think we should be very clear about what the state should be doing. State should be providing certain basic things, and here I'm taking the judiciary and the wider state into account. And here I would go back actually to the original Arthashastra of Kautilya. It's very interesting. People tend to remember Kautilya as some sort of a guy who was thinking only about
Enemies and how to
enemies
fix
and
them, yes.
spies and things
Spies,
like
yes.
that. But in fact, the Arthashastra is actually quite a wide document.
Yeah.
And while you may not want in modern times to use some of his exact prescriptions in terms of how to deal with punishments and things like that.
But that was 300
Yeah,
BC, huh?
there was 2,500, 300 years ago. But the general concept of statecraft in it is actually right. So what does he really want you to do? He wants the government to essentially provide external and internal security. The government or the state issues currency. It regulates bads, so social bads like
Indian companies not doing anything big in AI. I really understand, because my friend is a significant name in the world of AI, and from what I hear from him is that the best names, best people in India are either already sitting abroad or working for foreign companies sitting in India, and their salaries are not going to be replaced by Indian companies, and the people who are working in the Indian companies are just not that skilled.
in the case of Kautilya, he regulates prostitution, alcohol, and so on. I, for one, am a great believer that bad should be regulated, not banned.
Yeah.
In India, everything is either mandatory or it is
But
banned.
that's what Kautilya said. He said,
Beautiful sentence, beautiful sentence. In India, either everything is mandatory, or half the things are mandatory, half the things are banned. No choice, no using your brains, no decision making, no facing consequences for your actions, no learning from your actions. It's all a make believe movie set, and a bad movie set from the 1940s. It's either banned or mandatory. So you outsource all your brains to the government, to the state, and therefore we are left with absolute sheeple.
regulate. He didn't want it
Absolutely.
banned, yes.
He's absolutely clear on this. And then, of course, things like urban
In
design
fact,
and
if we
municipal
were a
issues.
Kautilyan state, we would allow betting in cricket.
Yes, we will.
Yes,
A lot of the
we
match
would.
fixing will go.
Absolutely.
और भाई ये भोसड़ी वाले जो जो लॉटरी बेटिंग ये सब बैन करते हैं, ये तो आई डोंट अंडरस्टैंड एट ऑल. I don't have even the agency to feel sad that I lost all my money and committed suicide. मेरा suicide prevent करने के लिए लॉटरी भी बंद बैन कर देगा.
Absolutely. So he was
और फिर बोलेगा died by suicide. Suicide नाम का एक पत्थर मेरे सर पे आके गिरा एक दिन. I didn't commit suicide. I died by suicide.
very much about regulating rather than banning. Again, very different from the Indian state today. Today, the Indian state either makes everything mandatory or it bans it. So, ironically, while you can keep aside his exact prescriptions from his time, but look at his underlying thinking,
Right.
then Kautilya basically saying that the Indian state is basically to provide certain things that the market cannot provide. Also interesting about the Kautilyan state, and this is very, very interesting, is that people think of Kautilya as an extremely suspicious person.
No, Rishi, in this, I know you are not remotely a socialist, but in this particular argument, you are thinking like a socialist. Why wouldn't they want to do if there was in fact profit, and that they and if they felt there was profit to be made in the short term or in the long run? Why wouldn't they do it? There's no secret reason, right? Or are you saying there's a conspiracy theory that they are getting threatened by Chinese government, that if they get into the big AI game, they will get fucked? Unless that is the case, they don't really have any reason to not get into it. So if they're not getting into it, it's because they can't pay the salaries of the highly skilled engineers.
But if you read the text, you will see he's not suspicious of the average citizen. He's mostly suspicious of the government officials. In fact, says that just like it is impossible to tell how much water a fish is drinking while swimming around in the water, it is not possible to tell how much treasury funds a official is skimming off while he is doing his functioning. So the Kautilyan state is extremely suspicious of the government official. And so the Kautilyan state is a strong state. Kautilya is not a libertarian. He has no sense of humor about the things that the state does. But then he completely circumscribes what the state is allowed to do. And so this is what I would consider as being what the Indian state should do. There are certain things it should do. It should do them well and should do nothing else.
So
nothing else.
The business part.
Nothing else. ये nothing else कब आएगा? वो sequence का बाद भी time भी चला गया है. और कब?
Yatin Shah from IIFL. He's referring to economic survey. It talks about wealth creation for Indians, and it talks about you talked about a multifaceted strategy to get to $5 trillion economy. So he wants to know from you, from where will this come? How much of it will come from digital economy, and where else will it come from? And also, as we go ahead, what will change? Do you think the contributing pie will change from digital to something else, or do you think the timelines will change?
So to answer this question, I will have to say, this question itself violates my philosophical framework. So let me explain this. You see, the post-COVID world is not going to be a reinflation of the pre-COVID world. It will have its own geopolitics. It will have its own technology, consumer behavior.
Well, it had for 4 years. We didn't really take much advantage of it. The Democratic Party was fucking with us, but now we are pretty much back to the old world order. We are back to 80s and 90s and pretty much 80s world.
Supply chains and so on. And there is no way on earth that even the best consultant, the best economist is going to know where exactly this is going to head. So while the government may take a few bets through PLI schemes and so on, to a large extent, this world that will emerge is essentially unknown. The jobs of the future for 10 years out will be completely new jobs. So I think the Indian state should not be in the business of trying to predict too much of this. The job of the Indian state is, one, to create the physical infrastructure that is definitely going to be needed. And here also we should keep an open mind about the changing needs of the economy. But other than that, we should basically get simple taxation, deregulate to the extent possible, and create spaces for the animal spirits of the private sector to generate these jobs.
Yeah, Sanatan Shashwat, that's a good point. We might need a lot more Sanjeev Sanyals, and that too in the government. Otherwise, the Sanjeev Sanyals outside government are too busy hating Hindutva, too busy hating India, too busy hating Indians, too busy hating Hinduism, or just simply saying, even if they agree with Sanjeev Sanyal going around saying that it's not feasible, तो अब क्या करे? कांग्रेस को वोट दे दे क्या? या फिर बीजेपी का वोट काट दे क्या? तो the group that we have right now who are actually serious people in this discourse, which are people like us who are saying we are not against Hinduism, we are not against Hindutva, we are not against Narendra Modi as a person even, but we are saying enough is not happening. It's time. We can't go around saying it's not feasible. It has to be done. We have to be the pressure group. Our number has to increase.
If I knew where those digital jobs are going to emerge, I shouldn't be wasting my time sitting here having this conversation with you. I should actually be Elon Musk investing in all these things. Since I do not know, I am an economist. If I didn't, I would be a billionaire. If I knew, I would be a billionaire investing in these areas. So the point is, it's not the business of the state, other than occasionally to create clusters or for emerging to provide protection to an emerging sector.
But it has to create an environment for entrepreneurs.
No, polymerist. The current crop of babus are not going to be less socialistish. They are not less socialistish. The guys who have gone in already, they are as socialist as the previous generation, but the current generation is less socialistic anyway. People outside the government, people outside the UPSC stuff.
Entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. It needs to create an environment for entrepreneurship. As I said, that requires deregulation. It requires certain amount of physical infrastructure that has to be in place. It requires simplification of the tax system. And we have simplified the corporate tax structure in late 2019, if you remember. I think the direct taxes on individuals also needs to be significantly simplified from where
we came close to it. There was a direct taxes code, but what happened? We got cold feet.
Well, it was discussed very thoroughly.
Cold feet. We are back in the era of cold feet. Retrowave is saying, do we even have the infrastructure to keep the Sanjeev Sanyals here in India? We know plenty of Sanjeev Sanyals abroad. We know of Vivek Ramaswamy abroad. He's an American citizen, but even if he wasn't, who would have given a shit? He would be absolutely relevant even in India. And yes, Sanjeev Sanyal, obviously global strategist for Deutsche Bank, urban planning department of Singapore, etc. Rhodes scholar. That guy working for the government is basically, at least salary wise, taking a demotion and working for India just because he loves the country. He's a staunch civilizationalist even. He has written history books that have woken up so many people without knowingly or unknowingly. The reels that go viral about India's past glories and stuff, most of them have come out of Ocean of Churn and Land of Seven Rivers. That's why this guy is in India. There's no other reason other than patriotism. But whether we will use his patriotism to our benefit or not, that's a separate question.
Thoroughly, and I believe my colleague, the chief economic advisor, was involved in looking through it. I don't know what its current status is, but there is a draft of it which has been discussed. Yes.
Yeah. So the second part of his question: do you see a $5 trillion economy achieved by then, or do you think this will be a case of shifting timelines?
I think some shift of timeline may happen, but I think the drift will be much smaller than people fear. And so let me explain. First of all, the shock that came from the COVID, yes, obviously, the worldwide we got hit by it, we got hit by it in India as well. But I think you will see a very strong recovery. Now, in the economic survey, we talk about a 11% real GDP growth rate. With inflation and other things, we'll probably, in nominal terms, hit 15%.
15%, yes.
But I think that is a conservative number. I would be very, very surprised if it is not significantly higher than this.
You are not concerned about the return of COVID? The second wave is growing quite menacingly.
As I said, since I believe in my whole theory and philosophy is about uncertainty and random shocks. I never write off the possibility of new strains coming and causing all kinds of other disruptions.
He's a complexity theory guy.
Sure. But I'm also an optimist. I think we did rather well in containing the first round. Yeah. Vaccines are on the way. And
but are we messing up a little with the second round by keeping the vaccine process too controlled?
Well, I'm not the person who's running the health side.
I know.
So take my words with a pinch of salt. But I think there is a case for doing it step by step. And let me explain why. You see, in India, there's always large numbers of people. And rolling out of any such thing has to be done in a phased manner, simply because if you suddenly open the whole thing up, there'll be queues of people queuing up to get themselves vaccinated suddenly on the first day. Then the media will turn up there. Aapka vaccine aaj bhi nahi hua, kal bhi nahi hua, dekhiye kaisa hua. So I think
the people are not turning up. That is the problem.
So fine, in which case we open out the gates wider and wider till the whole. And remember, many of these things worldwide, all the vaccines are now still being done under experimental basis.
The point
so we have to maintain certain amount of control.
When the first wave came, we had nothing to fight it with. Now we have a shield.
Yes, but it is initially at least an unknown shield. Too many people wanted that shield. Now we have used that shield for a while. Okay, we have tempered it, adjusted it at the edges. More people have been told that.
Yes, we are such sheeple that an untested vaccine was being hurried upon, and people were going around saying that no, give it fast. Why are you being so late on this? We need it right now, today. Even though when a phone comes out, you wait for a few months and wait for your friends to buy it. Maybe when a new bike comes out, not every one of us are stupid enough to buy any new model of bike immediately. We see how its servicing going to be. What are its parts? Does engine oil start leaking, or does the brakes get torn up? The brake pads and stuff get blown away. Especially the Royal Enfield people know what I'm talking about. So instead, when it was about a vaccine that you're going to put in your body, our sheeple, we the sheeple, started demanding it on the very first day and started saying that this fascist Modi can't even deliver vaccines on the very first day. Why doesn't he pull it out of his ass?
Where to buy the shield. And so this thing will be opened and opened wider and wider till it'll be like going and buying yourself vitamin C tablets.
Yeah. Because I think the way these vaccines are, I think we'll need one a year at least. At least for some time, because vaccines will get better with the course of time.
True. And remember also the virus has an incentive to become weaker and weaker.
I know.
Because every one of the deadliest diseases in the world eventually become weaker and weaker, because from the vaccine's perspective, they don't want to kill you too quickly.
Right.
They want to be weak and spread as far as possible.
Right.
So most of these viruses and other diseases over time become weaker. And it'll become like any other flu that we get once a year.
Yeah. So we have Sanjay Agarwal of AU Bank. It's a small finance bank which is doing very well. One of the new ones. And he has a concern about MSMEs. And I don't understand this very much, but he's in the market. He says that now MSME status has been withdrawn from traders. So with that, traders no longer have access to bank loans that they would have had if they were MSMEs. And in rural India, generally in the unorganized sector, interest rates are usurious, 36%, 39%, 40%, because people are desperate to borrow. So is something being done to bring them in the picture?
So this is not, we don't have an ideological problem about this.
Right.
This is a problem that has been brought to our notice.
Right.
And and I agree that you do want the trading sector to be alive and well. And in fact, I can say that without this sector and the small network of small kirana shops in the country, we would not have survived through the lockdowns over the last 1 year. So this, the small trader is an important part of our economic system, and we want to support it. Yes. So this has been brought to us, and there are people looking into this issue as we speak. So whatever sensible can be done to adjust for this will be done.
So Sanjay Agrawal, be reassured that this is being paid attention to. So the follow-up question he asks is, again, something that I don't know, that now even very small entrepreneurs or traders have to register on Udyam portal. And in rural India, many people may not know this, because by April 1, 2021, everybody has to be on it. So what are you doing to evangelize it, to make it easier so people don't get caught?
Since I'm not running it, I don't know what the process of evangelizing is. But the idea here is that some form of formalization is a good thing. Because once you have formalized it, then you are allowed, even providing support is easier to do. See, the problem is not that the government doesn't want to provide support and other things to various segments. But as shown with the Jan Dhan system, or even with the direct transfers of various kinds of benefits, once you have some identification and ability to target somebody, then you can provide support in a much simpler, targeted way with lesser leakages. So that is all that is being attempted here. Now, it is possible that the evangelizing of this is not adequate, and I can't comment on that since I don't know. But the concept is basically this.
This I agree. Semiconductor manufacturing and even nuclear, there I think good stuff is happening.
Once you clearly have a system of identification, and now most of these people anyway have an identification because of GST and other things that they're doing. So this is not something that they're going completely off kilter. All they have to do is connect 2-3 things they're already doing. Then it allows the whole system to function smoothly.
Today, do you see GST as a success or as a failure?
I would agree. I would say it's a huge success. And here again, let me say, introducing something like GST, or for that matter, the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, these are framework issues. Whenever we introduced it, at some point in our economic history, we had to introduce them. And whenever we did it, it would have been disruptive. But now that some time has passed, I would say that this system is, most businesses will agree that this system works reasonably smoothly. It is a significant improvement on whatever used to exist, because it's not as if some system didn't exist before. The question is this system significantly better than whatever exists before? And I think most people will agree it does. Even small businesses who used to complain more about it. Big businesses always thought it was a good idea. And it certainly has created an Indian common market. So not so long ago, it was easier for Mumbai to trade with Shanghai than to trade with Delhi. That has now certainly changed. We do genuinely have
some of that is getting messed up now with the states coming up with these new laws, 75% local, 75% local.
Bhumiputro, where is Rantak Pakko? See why your arguments are bad, why they will screw up the economy.
To trade with Delhi. That has now certainly changed. We do genuinely have
some of that is getting messed up now with the states coming up with these new laws, 75% local, 75% local. That is in a different common market.
Well, the labor market, yes. So now one of the interesting things that will happen here, because you can no longer protect, in a sense, your goods market, trying to provide protectionism to your labor market will have some interesting consequences, because now there is huge incentives for other states to wean away.
प्रोटेक्शनिज्म तो कितने सारे प्लान्स थे, क्या दिन थे वो, कितनी आशाएं थी। अरे बंगाली में वो जो गाना है, तुम लोगों को सुनना चाहिए, तुम लोगों को सब लोगों को समझ में भी आएगा। बाकी इंडिया में भी आशा छिलो, ভালোবাসা छिलो, छिलो मतलब था, आज आशा नहीं, ভালোবাসাও नहीं।
Your businesses, because they can sell you the goods from anywhere else. So competitive federalism will take care of this.
Yes, it's Punjab and Haryana.
Competitive federalism, competitive socialism chutiapa hua instead, competitive bhumiputrabazi, competitive rantakbazi.
And they could face a situation where Bihar and UP say we are not allowing our labor to go to your states.
No, forget about allowing. The fact is the businesses will shift. This is perfectly...
businesses will shift. कैसे sentences बोले जा रहे थे 2020s में, 2021 में, और फिर...
Why you want a common market? See, in the European common market, what happens? Either you allow the Poles and Romanians to move to your place, or the businesses will move to Poland. Now you decide how you wish it. I mean, maybe
yes, you do reservation for Rantak Pakko, businesses will shift to non-Rantak Pakko.
or social stability, you want to reserve it for yourself, that's perfectly
So what
fine.
would be your advice to Haryana government and Jharkhand government?
My advice would not be to them. My advice would be to their competitor state to kindly come to Gurgaon and wean away them. Let the competitive energies of different states do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I have no advice for people who want to introduce restrictions. It's
Because I read this Haryana law, and it said that in areas where you can prove to us that the necessary expertise does not exist, we will permit you to have workers from outside. That's like an H-1B visa within India.
Yeah.
Yes, except you do not have any control on services and goods being supplied.
Right.
So all I'm trying to say is let the market function. Now, it may be that Haryana then moves up the value chain into areas that are above their 50,000 rupee slab, and it becomes the Silicon Valley of India, and all the high-tech people want to live in Gurgaon, and all the low-tech stuff moves out. That's also perfectly fine. It is for them to judge. I'm not here to judge.
Yeah. Except it will lose their purpose of creating low-paid jobs.
Yeah.
Maybe yes, maybe not. But that is, as I said, it is a democracy.
Problem, yes.
It is a democracy. Let the feedback loop of democracy and economics then play itself out. My main objection usually is to the idea that is in fact to this idea that they will allow these exceptions, because that will mean that some bureaucrat is allowed to take a judgment on whether this should be allowed or that should be allowed.
तुम करो रंटकबाजी, फाइनल डिसीजन तो ब्यूरोक्रेट ही लेगा जो कि नॉन बंगाली है, मगर फिर उसका फेवरेटिज्म होगा कि कौन से रंटक वालों को दे, ये रंटक वाले को दे या वो रंटक वाले को दे, या फिर किसने मुझे ज्यादा टिकट दिया है फॉरेन टूर्स के लिए.
That is where my main objection
we also know
if it was a simple rule.
We also know who's the minister squatting over these portfolios, and
that, as I said, I can't comment on it.
This is a coalition issue. Coalition dharma issue. Nevertheless, so there is a young fellow from Haryana, since we mentioned Haryana just now, who you and I both know, Arjun Kadian. And it's a question away from our theme, who says that you in the past talked about leveraging Haryana's cultural wealth to create more interest besides agriculture.
Right. So in fact, I've argued in many places that, particularly we Bengalis tend to have this dismissive idea about certain parts of northern India as not being cultured.
Right.
The irony is that Indic civilizations, sort of origins, lie in Haryana. This is Brahmavarta, the land between the Saraswati and the Drishadwati, both of them now dried rivers. And of course, now we have archaeologically found some of the largest Bronze Age sites in Haryana. Rakhi Gadi, as you know, is as large as Harappa plus Mohenjo-daro combined. So in some ways, this is the heart of our civilization. And Haryana, ironically, does not leverage this at all. I mean, whether it's the sites of the Mahabharata or the sites of the Rig Veda are all in Haryana.
Haryana builds these tourist complexes near canals and stuff.
Yes, but let me give you examples of unbelievable things which are not explored by Haryanvis themselves. So not very far from here, about an hour and a half drive south of here through Gurgaon, there's a hill called Dhosi Hill, in very close to the Haryana-Rajasthan border. Now, it's a part of the Aravalli Hills, and it is one of the oldest geological features on this planet. It is an ancient volcano. It's a pyramidical shape. And if you bother to climb to the top of it, there is a caldera with a small kund.
I see.
Now, it's a beautiful place, by the way, and beautiful views of the surrounding landscape. But it is a very interesting place for other reasons. This is the original place where the Bhrigu family of rishis used to live and had their hermitage. And there was a rishi called Chavanya, who was Bhrigu Rishi's son, who took a dip, because he had leprosy, I believe, and he took a dip in this kund and he was cured. And after he got cured, he became the father of Ayurveda. So Chavanya Prash is from Chavanya Rishi.
Okay.
So he had his hermitage in there. And the point of the matter, it's a beautiful location. And if you climb up...
You've been walking up and down the Aravallis quite a bit. I see from your Twitter postings.
So it's a phenomenally beautiful landscape. And I'm amazed that almost nobody goes there. I spent a day walking up this with Arjun, in fact. And from there, you can see the Khetri mines, copper mines on one side. On the other side, you can see where the Drishadwati and the Saraswati used to meet. And further out, although it's a hazy, because it's too hazy, you can't see it. But I believe not far away, if you were looking due north, you would be able to see Rakhi Gadi. So this is really the heart of Indian civilization. And yet we don't bother with this at all. I mean, most Haryanvis don't know about it.
Most certainly don't. At least I did. For that also, we need a Bengali to come and find it for us. See?
Yes, maybe.
You Bengalis have been ignoring us.
Maybe, yes, you need a few more Bengalis digging around. After all, even the discovery of the Harappan sites was done by Rakhal Das.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Sanjay, coming back
Finally, some happiness for Antak Pokho, which they refuse to acknowledge.
to sort of more common themes. Prabodh Thakur, who runs an insurance company, Global Insurance Brokers Private Limited, he says, how can Indian companies support other Indian companies in India under Atmanirbhar Bharat in such a way that it's not seen as narrowness, protectionism, or parochialism?
So I think I do need to explain what Atmanirbhar Bharat is. So first of all, let me clearly state, this is not some attempt to return to pre-1991 import substitution. Neither I nor anybody in the government has any interest in going back
And
to
you are
driving.
sure the Prime Minister doesn't want it, and this Swadeshi Jagran Manch kind of pressure doesn't work.
I can clearly tell you that the Prime Minister has no interest in going back to driving in ambassador cars again. So what does this really mean? So I need to explain this if you'll give me. So about a year ago, when this whole COVID thing started, we discovered something interesting about one of our most competitive sectors, which is our drugs and pharmaceutical sector. Everybody loves our drugs and pharmaceutical sector. Everybody agrees that it is extremely globally competitive. But we learned very quickly that it was entirely dependent on
APIs from China.
Absolutely. Single source APIs from China. So we have decided to provide a certain amount of protection to at least some of these APIs should come from India, or at least they should diversify to
In
some.
fact, a lot of the antibiotic APIs were produced in India. And as the laws got twisted in India and in China, all they shifted to China.
Absolutely. So now if I say I want to provide a certain amount of protection for having the key APIs, not everyone.
Active pharmaceutical intermediaries, what is it?
API, good questions. Active pharmaceutical inputs, I think.
Okay.
I'm not dead sure. I'm now forgotten. But it's basically pharmaceutical inputs.
That's right.
And the idea basically is the following, that if I decide to provide a certain amount of protections that the key ones get produced in India, this is not an act of protectionism in the pre-1991 sense. This is merely being practical about managing the resilience of an extremely competitive global industry. This is how we think about this. Same thing is true, we'll provide protection for certain kinds of defense sectors. Now, but this is very different from, say, stopping foreign companies from coming and doing business here. Far from it, we are opening up certain sectors for them to do. We are allowing foreign companies to come here and invest in defense. We are opening up insurance. Just in this budget, we have done 74% now. So what we want, basically saying that, come and do business here. This is true of foreign business coming here, but we are also telling, as your question pointed out, we want Indian industry to go out there and do their stuff. So deregulate it, encourage domestic competition, but also domestic industry, provide in certain areas a certain amount of support. And that is where these PLI schemes, the production-linked incentive schemes, do your thing, do it in India, provide new technologies, bring them in here, train our guys, and of course, trigger Indian animal spirits to go and invest.
But are we then also looking at CBI cases 5 years down the line on how people misuse the PLI scheme?
Now, of course, if somebody misuses it, as I said, the strong but limited state, limited bit is what we talked about, but the strong part is also important. The Cotilian state has no sense of humor about misuse.
By the way, that Ambassador Bazi has come back. We are basically back to Ambassador Bazi in many aspects, which is now going to decrease because of Trump's tariffs.
So the same state that is suspicious and of its officials and limits them also does not take lightly to people breaking its laws. So minimum government is good, but maximum governance is also a part of the deal.
Right. Good. So YP Rajesh, who's our managing editor, he wants to know bank privatization. 2 banks have to be privatized this year. 1 insurance company. How confident are you that government will be able to do it, given the fact that we've just had protests on farm laws and then also some labor protests? In fact, there's another question from a young colleague of mine, P.R. Krishnan Kuti, who says that, what does this bank strike indicate? Does it indicate that pressure is already building up?
Clearly, there will be people who will oppose this. Otherwise, somebody else would have done it. So nobody is claiming that these are simple things to do, whether it's the farm laws or private.
Yeah, and yes, we know it's a problem. We know it's tough to make it feasible, but it's the right thing to do, and we need it. And your feasibility depends on some people demanding something or the other, right? And now here we are, the urban young adult, 20s, 30s, 40s youth who are saying that we have had enough of socialism with Sanskrit words, socialism with new English words. Socialism is socialism.
Or any other kind of reform. If there was no opposition to it, then clearly somebody would have already done it. So the fact that there is some opposition does not come as a great surprise. The question is it worthwhile to do? And are we committed to it? That is the main question you are asking. And let me say, we are committed to it. In the case of the farm laws, we are willing to talk to the farmers. There may be genuine issues that need to be, the edges can be maybe smoothened out, but we continue to be committed to the general idea. After all, these reforms were debated for something like 3 decades.
That's right.
And I don't think this argument flows through that, oh, there was not enough consultation. I'm afraid there was consultation and consultation and consultation. So my view is they need to be done, while the exact way in which it was done can be smoothened out. But I think I think the political leadership and certainly technocrats like myself are completely committed to it. The same thing is true, by the way, of privatization.
Yeah.
Just as an aside, many of these companies, by the way, used to be private companies.
Exactly. So all the oil companies, for example, insurance companies,
Air India, most of these banks were all private companies. They were taken over. Now, one can have a long debate about whether it was sensible to take it over at that time. Some people will say it was. I am of the belief even at that point in time, it was perhaps not a good idea.
No, in fact, government wanted to do more banking. They could have set up new banks of their own.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And in fact, what happened when the initial nationalization happened, right in the beginning, large financial scandals happened. India's first financial scandal.
No, Rishabh, this is from March 2021 or May. Let me check. Yeah, March 2021.
In the mid-50s, where the Mundra scandal was linked to LIC being nationalized.
Yes.
So right in the beginning, there was something fishy about the whole business of nationalization. So therefore, my own view is and since then, by the way, there's been a huge amount of value destruction in many of these institutions. Many did not grow to the extent they could, and many of them, of course, became hugely loss-making and continue to gobble up large amounts of resources, whether it's BSNL or MTNL.
I think a very good example is Coal India, because as global coal prices have gone up, Coal India's stock price has come down.
So, we can keep debating these individual companies. So, as a concept, it is very clear that in many areas, we do need to privatize. Now, I have no ideological problem with retaining certain amount of public sector. There are many areas you want public sector. Clearly in defense, the state should have some capacity. Even in finance, by the way, some amount of banking should be in public hands. After all, even India's private banks have not covered themselves in glory.
Absolutely,
they have different problems, but they do have their own problems. So I am of the view that there are strategic
sectors. Yeah, what we discussed in the previous live stream as well. कि आज के डेट पे liquidity का इतना problems face कर रहे हैं banks after Sanjeev Sanyal cleaned up the banks, and for the first time they're having to compete with able and real institutions. अब उनके लौड़े लग रहे हैं.
Where the government does need to maintain certain amount of presence, and they should, and that is our policy. But for many things, you should now allow the private sector to either take it over completely, like in airlines and hotels and things like that, or more space should be created for them to function. So, for example, in the case of the banking sector, today we have almost 2/3, almost 70% of the banking system is in public hands. Now, even if I make a case that some part of into the foreseeable future or forever, some part of the banking system will always be public, even if I accept that, and I think that is the case, then even then you cannot make the case that 70% of it should be the public sector.
Yes.
So some space creation for the private sector has to be there. So some of it should happen through the existing private sector growing. Some of it should happen through new players coming in, and I am a votary for allowing new private banks to come in. And of course, on the edges, some 2 banks or whatever number is suitable should be allowed to be privatized too.
Are you okay with the idea of corporates running, industrial groups running banks?
That is a more complicated question. There is one question: should private sector be allowed a bigger space? Unequivocally, yes. In the case of allowing the corporate sector to come in, then you have to manage an additional problem, which is of conflict of interest. Should then a bank
lend to that group,
lend to the same group? Now, if it is a standalone institution which is doing its own thing, then I have no problem. If it is linked to another group and it is lending to the same group, then the question is, who decides on credit quality? Will they be able to? Will the Chinese walls be good enough that some amount of favoritism doesn't happen? After all, the banking system, in the end, in every country, is implicitly backed by taxpayers. So consequently, we will end up implicitly backing an entire corporate group. So this is a much more complicated issue than saying private sector being allowed in. And here I have some misgivings of being completely allowing free, sort of laissez-faire in this. So there has to be some restrictions, and they have to be carefully designed. So this is not an area where I want free flow.
So Ramya Nair, who's my colleague, who you might know, she covers business and finance for us. She's taking us back to the retrospective tax that Arun Jaitley had promised, who you knew very well.
Yes.
He was very fond of you. He had promised a long time back that this retrospective taxation laws will be withdrawn. Why has it still not happened? And do foreign investors now still carry a sense of grievance or concern about Vodafone and Care?
See, retrospective taxes is not a good idea. And former Finance Minister Jaitley had on the floor of the Parliament promised that it will never happen again. So the question is, what do we do with the legacy cases? And the government has so far allowed it simply to go to its logical conclusion. It is now basically at the end of whatever can be done in that process. And my sense is that in the end, as whatever happens, something will work out which will work for everybody. But it is not something, this is not an experiment we would want to repeat ever again.
So will you still want to appeal this Care and Vodafone arbitration decision?
Well, this is a decision obviously above my pay grade. So, but as I said, as the theoretician of the government, let me say this is not an experiment we want to do again, ever again.
Yeah. Okay. Ramakrishna Prayas, very simple question. He works for Jindal Steel and Power. How will the Indian economy function in the next 3 years? 3 years of this government, obviously.
Fair enough. So I think clearly one major issue is the revival process, which is clearly in that we are signaled in our the recently announced budget that this is about reconstruction and rebuilding and getting the momentum of the economy going again. And here we have taken a path which is somewhat different from what other countries have done and what many other experts may have advised us to do. First of all, we have gone for providing fiscal support. But we have taken a peculiar path for it, which is that we have done it almost exclusively through capital expenditure. Many experts and economists were of the opinion we should have gone for trying to boost consumption expenditure through various kinds of transfers. The America has, for example, gone for stimulus checks and so on.
But when people
this is where I support the government big time. Abhijit Banerjee, Subramanian Swamy, all of them recommended cash stimulus packages, which would have increased inflation even more.
Scared, they don't want to spend, you transfer money to them, they put it in the bank.
That is precisely the point that we made as one of the reasons why we did not do this. The second reason is, let's be clear, we are going to run up debts to do this. Future generations will have to repay it. We want to leave assets for them.
Yes.
So this is one part of why we wanted to make sure that capital expenditure is the path we want to take. And unlike maybe a developed country, we have lots of physical infrastructure that needs to be built. So why not use this as an opportunity to build it? I mean, you can consider it the Eisenhower moment or whatever you may want to call this, or the New Deal. But why not use that?
America is still using the highways they built that they built when they built them.
Absolutely. So this is one part of what we wanted to do. And so if you look at the fiscal deficit, we have allowed for that fiscal deficit to eventually drift down over 3 years to the original path, but have not tried to squeeze it there very quickly. The other thing that many, especially US-based Indian economists, were of the opinion that we should then finance this with very high tax rates. But we have been very, very clear that we are not going to do this.
I think the demand for high tax rates is to be seen to be hurting everybody else but me.
Yes, my view always was that those who advocate these high tax rates should advocate it in the country of their residence.
Exactly.
So that they and their progeny pay for it.
Right.
I think
he's talking about people like Kaushik Basu, allegedly.
That in India, we should be trying to go for growth.
I mean, you may still be too young for it, but I was in college when India had 97% tax, 97.48% tax.
Well, I don't remember it in memory, but I certainly have read enough about the times.
That's when we gave birth to the black economy.
Yeah.
It's not just about the black economy in terms of sheer fairness. If you want the private sector to be taking risks, and and you want creative destruction, and you are saying that we're going to have the insolvency and bankruptcy code, which will liquidate you if you get it wrong, then on the other side, you have to also have the system that if you did get it right and you were lucky and
you pay all of it to me,
then you paid all of it to me cannot be true. We have to allow that person the incentive structures to be such that people take risks.
Incentives. कब last सुना है हमने ये सब term government में?
So in a risk-taking economy, you've got to have a system where taxes are kept low. And so in 2019, we had brought down the corporate tax rates. And let me say, if a time comes where we are earning enough in revenues because there's enough momentum in the economy, this should also be done for personal taxes. It's just that it's just that we don't have the space to bring everything down.
Right.
But ideally, we should have very low tax rates and simple tax rates.
And no income tax rates, flat 12% for only the upper middle class and the upper class.
Sanjeev, last question I will take is from somebody who knows what she's talking about. Again, Ramya, inflation targeting strategy that India has right now. Do you think it is right? And what's your view on inflation? Sujit Balla has written something today in the Express.
So it depends what you thought the inflation targeting system was set up to do. The purpose of the inflation targeting system was, in my view, to basically anchor India's inflation into the 2 to 6% range from an earlier range of 8 to 12% range. We were never a very high inflation country in the Latin American sense.
No. Only in early mid 70s, 74, 75.
But by and large,
But even then was 27, 28% annual. So
yes, and that era was everybody has high inflation, but we were basically an 8 to 12% inflation country. The inflation targeting was successful in the limited thing that it was supposed to bring inflation back into this 2 to 4% range, and it did a decent job of that.
2 to 6%.
Sorry, 2 to 6% range.
Yeah.
And it did if that was what it was meant to do, it was successful. Now, I agree with Surjit Bhalla. It was helped in this process by the fact that global inflation also was well behaved during this period.
Right.
And yes, maybe we were lucky in that.
Right.
But the inflation targeting system for the thing it was set up to do succeeded. Now comes the next question. First, was there a price we paid for this? Yes, we did. Because for a period of time, I would argue, we had to keep monetary policy tighter than we would have otherwise kept it. And that.
Rishi, what's your reason for thinking that labor reforms are coming? I do think it's also coming, but that's because of the tariff counter that we are going to do. We are going to import more from USA, which is going to force Indian companies to step up their game, for which India will have to get rid of labor laws. Why do you think labor laws are going to go away? Dada, do you invest in stocks? If not, why? No, I invest in stocks. All not specific stocks. Some Nifty and some Nifty Bs and some mutual funds and stuff. Oh, news में आ गया भोसड़ी के कब? अरे कहाँ? Shit. Okay, nice. I'll check the news. Who is India's Javier Milei? One guy is making a stitch ship. One guy is running a YouTube channel.
In that, and by the way, I am, I'm publicly known to have been a critic of keeping real interest rates too high for too long during the period 16, 17, 18. So it comes as no surprise that I think at that point in time we should have loosened things without having too much inflation in the system. But nevertheless, the fact is that was really a management failure. It was not a problem of the inflation target, because after all, at that stage, if you remember, there were two occasions where the inflation rate actually fell below the 2%.
Yes, Rishabh. For long term, I don't do trading, so I was not recommending trading, but I was about to recommend Ashwath Damodaran even for long term investing or even for trading and stuff. And I did a financial markets course on Coursera as well, taught by a Nobel laureate Yale professor. Very, very nice, very, very lucid course. If you have a bit of background in statistics, then you won't have any problems. I'm a guy who studied maths up until class 10, 11, 12 I had pure humanities. Science I gave up in class 8, 9, 10 में मेरा environmental science था. So even such a guy like me had no problem, had not much of a problem going through that course.
Bottom. So I think the monetary managers of that time should have been a little more careful and should have perhaps managed it such that it was brought more towards the center, the 4% range. But anyway, done is done. That is not a failure of the target mechanism. I would take Surjit Bhalla's second argument more seriously, where he also argues that the CPI basket should be regularly updated. That, I think, is a fair...
That is the consumer price index.
Yeah, the consumer price index. Our basket of consumption is now significantly different from what the consumer basket now reflects. Food has clearly come off very significantly. Any country which becomes richer, its importance of food in our basket goes down. And those of new things like, for example, our mobile phone has become an important part of our basket. That should now reflect in our...
it's called data over atta.
Data over atta. But every generation, every 10 years, it has to update it. So the time, I think, has come to have a CPI which reflects our consumption basket, and that would also remove all these other complications. Is this core? Should it be core? All of these discussions.
So what are the bond prices telling us now?
So globally,
yields are going up in India.
So this has to be, so the Indian global popping up of yields has to be seen in the context of what is happening globally. And this is a little evolved. So
because in your previous avatar, you worked for an international bank.
Yes, and my job was to bet on interest rates and exchange rates.
Right.
So this is actually a very involved issue. So you'll have to give me a few minutes to explain this. Sure. You see, as a part of this reinflation of the world, the reserve currency issuing countries, particularly the US, has pumped out a huge amount of money supply. Now, it was needed from the narrow perspective of reinflating the economy from where
2 साल में $3 trillion print कर लिए भोसड़ी वाले.
Where we are right now. However, here comes the tricky bit. What happens when you increase the amount of money by such a large amount, when it is not clear when you will be able to suck it out again? Because any attempt to suck it out too early will cause you to spiral down again. So now the question is, and this is really nobody knows the answer, will this trigger inflation or not?
In the US.
Well, in the world, because they are the reserve currency.
Yeah, because $1.9 trillion more has now come.
Well, that is on the fiscal side, which will obviously financed also through another monetary boost. So there's this huge amount of money sloshing around on the planet, and it finds its way into commodity prices like oil prices and every kind of other things. Through our foreign exchange reserves that even feeds through to our money supply. So since this is the amount of money that is sloshing around, the question is, will it trigger inflation or not? Now, there are many theories on this. There are those who will argue, and there's something called modern monetary theory, which will argue that no, this doesn't really matter because the link between money supply and inflation is rather a weak one. In the very long run, maybe there's an impact, but if inflation does come back, there's more than adequate time to withdraw this monetary stimulus and so on. And others who will argue that, look, so much money will eventually be a bad thing. In any case, the danger is that what will happen here is that you will trigger this inflation, and you will get stagflation, and they'll give the experience of the 60s and 70s when you went off the gold link of the dollar to the gold, and then you had the spiraling, and yes, it all ended all very badly, and ultimately you had to hike up interest rates and stop this whole thing. Now, what is my view on this? Well, I don't have to solve America's problems, but I do have to look at what the impact is on India. I think we have done correctly. For the time being, we have allowed the rupee to appreciate in a creeping sort of way and accumulated a large amounts of reserves. But this reserves that we are accumulating does not earn us anything, and it is denominated in the very reserve currencies that are being printed too much of. So at some point in time, we will have to begin to take a call on when we begin to think of the rupee itself as a reserve currency. Because that will mean that we will then have to be willing to allow the rupee to become an international currency.
If I may interrupt for a second, did you mean we've allowed rupee to appreciate or depreciate slowly?
Appreciate. So if you look at the rupee in the last 1 year, it's been
in terms of inflation, it has appreciated.
Yes. So it has appreciated a little bit, but in fact, if the Reserve Bank was not accumulating reserves like the blazes, now we have almost.
Stock recommendations are absolutely a strict no for YouTube, because who knows who will listen to what and lose all their money and stuff. So if I was a first generation middle class person, like I actually am, my father's generation, grandfather's generation grew up selling gamchas, so I do invest in stocks. So I think I should. So that should answer you.
600 billion worth of reserves. The rupee would probably just guess.
I don't invest in individual stocks, Nifty Bs, small Bs, and mutual funds. Different mutual funds, different caps, and some monthly, some daily SIPs.
It would probably be at 60 something, 65 or some such level. So we have creepingly allowed it to appreciate, but stood in the way. Why have we accumulated all these reserves? Well, one part of it is that by accumulating these reserves, we are allowing this money to flow through into our economy, which was a good thing because we wanted excess liquidity in our own financial system during we were going through this shock. So this was one advantage to it. The second advantage to it is that we built up this huge bulwark of reserves, which means that we now have more reserves than we have debt. So India, interestingly, is currently a net creditor country to the rest of the world, including private sector debt. This means that whether we get a ratings downgrade or whatever other shocks may come our way, we are insulated from it because we are a creditor country in the end. And so this is a good thing. We have built this bulwark, but there is a limit to this bulwark. Should we have $2 trillion worth of reserves? No, because we earn nothing, no returns on this. So what do we do? Do we allow the rupee to keep appreciating against the dollar, especially when we earn nothing, since we are not earning anything against the dollar? If it keeps appreciating, is it bad for our exports? These are all decisions that have to be taken according to the circumstances. There's no, there's no rule book to play by, particularly because we are entering a zone where if we aspire to be a global economy, $5 trillion economy or even bigger eventually, then we have got to begin to think seriously about, at some point, not immediate future, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, the rupee itself being a reserve currency. Because that is when other countries will be willing to finance us at near zero interest rates.
Someday.
It will not happen immediately, but we have to be willing then to begin to doing things like allow the internationalization of the rupee. Cannot be done today. So don't jump immediately, but we have to begin to think about these issues. So for example, our inclusion in global bond indices, which we are hoping to do sometime this year. This is a step towards that direction.
Well, good. So before we conclude this, give us your guess for this year's growth rate. We know Moody's, we know McKinsey, we know Credit Suisse, we know the economic survey. Give me your guess.
Well, since as a co-author of the economic survey, I have to say the economic survey has basically done gone for 11%. Plus 4.5% inflation gives you a nominal GDP growth rate somewhere in the 15.5%, 15.3%.
Yeah.
I think that is a conservative number. Now, I'm not in a position to put a hard number, but let me say that will be considered eventually a conservative number. I think the reinflation of the Indian economy will be very strong. In fact, we can already witness quite a lot of it, despite ripples along the way, whether second wave and all that kind of thing. And I think other than a few sectors which we have deliberately held down, like international travel or entertainment and so on,
Deliberately held down, lol. Deliberately held down.
almost all other sectors have seen very, very strong recovery.
Yes.
Strongest in the world.
Yeah.
In fact, so much so it is now causing some disruptions.
Yes.
I myself have very recently purchased a car and I had to wait for several months before I got delivery of it because, the factories were not able to to keep up.
Labor laws.
So I think that's the good news. And as a society, never mind the government, I think as a society, we demonstrated to the world that we can really deal with big shocks.
Yeah.
I think the administration, I think the way even our villages dealt with such a major shock, keeping peace for 1.35 billion people through a big lockdown, extreme disruption, the system kept going. And look at the amount of chaos that has happened even in developed countries. Whether it's political chaos or breakdowns of all kinds, I think we Indians need to be proud of ourselves.
Well, I think on that note we can conclude this session. And given how pretty your neighborhood is, I think we look forward to doing it again at some point of time. And then we talk about maybe archaeology and culture a little bit more, and also urban governance.
It will be a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev.
Thank you.
Wait, we are coming back at 11:30 to discuss the VAD interview. I'm going to show you all just one section from this interview 3 weeks back, okay?
और कराची भी 20-25%.
Let me see if I can find it.
अफगानिस्तान जो आपका बॉर्डर है,
There's just one particular thing I want to show you.
सीरिया में चले गए.
अरे इनके हालात ये है, अभी मैं देख रहा था ये ढाका स्टार की एक
इसमें बहुत कुछ भयंकर आतंक आने वाला है, ग्लोबल कोलैप्स आने वाला है.
तो वो तो खैर बहुत सारे लोग तो बोल रहे हैं ना कि डॉलर तो 3 रुपए का हो जाएगा. तो वो कोलैप्स है ना, डी-डॉलराइजेशन भी हो जाएगा आपका.
देखिए, डी-डॉलराइजेशन अभी नहीं होने वाला है. लेट्स बी क्लियर अबाउट इट. एट सम पॉइंट इट विल हैव टू हैपन. अगर कमला होती, मैं बोलता फास्टर ट्रेजेक्टरी टू डी-डॉलराइजेशन. बट ये जो अमेरिका को एबिलिटी है टू रीइन्वेंट इटसेल्फ एंड मैं टू बी ऑनेस्ट मैं सोचता नहीं था कि ये ट्रम्प इस बार जीतेगा. मैं बस पनौती
वो तो
नहीं कर रहा था.
as soon as you said कि ट्रम्प नहीं जीतेगा तो आई न्यू ही विल विन. तो सबसे बड़ी पनौती हो.
नहीं, बट तो इसीलिए मैं बोल रहा हूं ना, यशस्वी श्री जेपी नड्डा जी के नेतृत्व में भाजपा भारी से भारी जीत हासिल करेगी आने वाले दिल्ली असेंबली चुनाव में. तो इसमें क्या है,
समझ गया आप क्या कहना चाहते हैं.
जी, तो इसमें क्या है कि जो इंस्टीट्यूशनल कैप्चर हो रखा है ना अमेरिका का, पूरा एकेडेमिया, पूरा टेक इंडस्ट्री, पूरा सब इंडस्ट्री, एंड यूजिंग एन इन्वेस्टमेंट टर्म लाइक ब्लैक रॉक व्हिच एसेंशियली फॉलोज जॉर्ज सोरोस's एजेंडा मोर और लेस. ये लोग क्या कर रहे थे कि पूरे इकोनॉमी पे, पॉलिटिक्स पे कैप्चर करके रखा था, जो अब टूट गया है. ये एक किस्म से मिरेकल है. आई डिड नॉट थिंक इट वाज पॉसिबल कि अमेरिका इस बार अपने आप को कोर्स करेक्शन कर पाएगा, पर कोर्स करेक्शन हो रहा है, आंखों के सामने हो रहा है. दैट इज व्हाट द इलेक्शन वाज अबाउट. तो इस बार
अगर इसके बाद में ये भी देख रहे हैं कि हो रहा है, जो आप कह रहे हैं हो रहा है, और उसमें एलन मस्क इज प्लेइंग अ वेरी लार्ज रोल, एन ओवरसाइज्ड रोल.
यस,
तो क्या अब ये एलन मस्क जो है वो ही विल बी जॉर्ज सोरोस ऑफ द राइट?
आई होप सो, क्योंकि मैं अब थक चुका हूं कि वी शुडंट इंटरफेयर इन अदर पीपल्स पॉलिटिक्स. जब लेफ्ट इतने ओपनली करता है दूसरों के पॉलिटिक्स में दखलंदाजी, आई थिंक राइट को भी करना चाहिए. और हमको तो जॉर्ज सोरोस, वी शुड बी सेलिब्रेटिंग इलॉन मस्क बिकमिंग द जॉर्ज सोरोस ऑफ द राइट.
लेकिन उसके दूसरे भी तो इम्प्लीकेशन होते हैं ना. वो उनका जो पूरा जो मागा फ्रिंज जो था वो पूरा का पूरा इंडियंस के अगेंस्ट कूद पड़ा.
तो मैं बहुत आसानी से ये बोल रहा हूं कि बस देख लीजिए, वी शुड हैव द सेल्फ कॉन्फिडेंस. इफ इलॉन टर्न्स इनटू अ थ्रेट, आगे अगर थ्रेट बन गया हमारे लिए, हमको भी आत्मविश्वास होना चाहिए कि हम उस थ्रेट को डील कर सकें. ये नहीं कि जयचंद्र और पृथ्वीराज चौहान एक दूसरे के म्यूचुअल मिसट्रस्ट की वजह से गजनी को घोरी को डिफीट नहीं कर पाए, फिर पृथ्वीराज चौहान का भी सर काट दिया और जयचंद्र का भी सर काट दिया। अभी के लिए पृथ्वीराज चौहान और जयचंद्र को एकजुट होना पड़ेगा। बाद में जो आएगा वो बाद में देख लेंगे। वो एक आत्मविश्वास होना चाहिए। Why are we so lacking in our own
going on a wrong tangent? मैं वो कहीं नहीं रहा, मैं उसकी बात ही नहीं कर रहा। मैं सेल्फ कॉन्फिडेंट है या नहीं है, मैं कह रहा हूँ कि it has a certain other implication as
Okay, let me just answer Abir Zain's question here. He was asking what is Shayok Paul's views on DeepSeek and does he have any plan on building DeepSeek of India? He's too young to build a company, to start a company of his own. He doesn't come from that kind of a family. But I asked him this thing that Shamika Ravi posted that I sent him this exact quote and I asked him why is she saying this. She said that is DeepSeek R1 the biggest positive productivity shock to the global economy in recent history? So he said, it is, I said, what is so special about DeepSeek? Explain to me. And why is she saying this? So he responded to me in Bengali. I'm not going to spend, okay, I'll see if I have to translate it. He said that better than O1 of OpenAI at a fraction of the pricing, fully open model with a detailed technical report on how it was made possible by a small and crack team from China. প্রোডাক্টিভিটি শক বলেছে কারণ বড় বড় বালবিচিরা এতই চোদাচুদি করেও কিছু ছিটতে পারেনি, যেটা একটা छोटो टीम করে দেখিয়েছে DeepSeek R1 ए। तो ही सेड दैट बहुत बहुत भाषणबाजी करने वाले लोगों ने भी जितना नहीं उखाड़ा है उतने उससे बहुत ज्यादा करके दिखाया DeepSeek R1 का ये स्मॉल टीम ने। एंड देन दे डेयर टू मेक इट ओपन and more importantly DeepSeek is primarily quant trading firm without the kind of apparent expertise needed to build AIs like this, फिर भी कर लिया है। That's his answer basically.
as we saw कि वो जो पूरा का पूरा उनका जो मागा फ्रिंज था वो अमेरिकन इंडियंस के ऊपर, हिंदूज के ऊपर टूट पड़ा।
नहीं, मागा फ्रिंज नहीं, वो मागा में भी एक माइनर फ्रिंज है। कौन थे वो?
लॉरा लूमर एंड कंपनी।
वो कौन है? देखिए, जो भी टूट पड़ा है हिंदूज पे वो बस इंटरनेट सेलिब्रिटी हैं और कुछ नहीं, उनका डे जॉब नहीं
यही
है।
मैं बोलता हूँ। और फिर जिन लोगों को थोड़ा कंप्लेन करके मजा आ रहा है, जो लोग आर ऑलवेज लेट टू द पार्टी एंड कंप्लेन टू द पार्टी, जब वेस्ट कुछ करेगा तब वो नहीं देखेंगे, उसके बेसिस पे फॉर्मुलेट नहीं करेंगे आर्ग्यूमेंट्स। फिर 10 साल बाद, 5 साल बाद जो वेस्ट ने कर चुका है, मूव ऑन कर लिया है, फिर वेस्ट से सीख के आज के दिन पे वो अप्लाई करेंगे। तो अभी लोगों को लग रहा है कि जब कंप्लेनिंग हैज बिकम अनकूल अगेन, अब लोग सोच रहे हैं कि हाँ हर जगह पे मैं रेसिज्म बोल दूंगा और मुझे लोग ज्यादा भाव देंगे। नहीं भाई, वो एक स्मॉल फ्रिंज माइनॉरिटी है जो कतार सोरोस फंडिंग से चल रहा है और बहुत ही सिग्निफिकेंट एक एनोनिमस बॉट अकाउंट से भरा हुआ है वो डिस्कोर्स ट्विटर पे ही सिर्फ।
ठीक है ना? और उनको सब निकाल दिया गया। लॉरा लूमर को डिमोनेटाइज कर दिया गया, वो पोसोबिएक और चर्नोविच उन सबको निकाल दिया गया। और अब क्या हो रहा है? ट्रम्प डजंट वांट टू एसोसिएट विद देम।
Yes, but to their credit, it must be said that they defended the H1B program openly.
Very openly.
उसको defend किया।
And they kicked them all out. ना? Laura Loomer won't be invited to Mar-a-Lago ever again.
अरे एक इसमें व्यू पॉइंट ये भी है कि भाई वो भी जो है वो इन्होंने जो पुरानी डीप स्टेट है उसी ने हैंडल किया इनको, और इनको प्रोवोक किया या इनके साथ माइंड गेम किया। They were handled in such a way.
I'm so glad Sanjay Dixit has understood this. He has not jumped on the racism Rona Dhona Dandi Rona train.
कि उन्होंने ये जाने या अनजाने, we don't know जाने या अनजाने, लेकिन they were gamed by the.
And it's very important if Hindi speaking, especially boomer audiences who listen to Sanjay Dixit, they also don't jump on the Randi Rona train. It's so awesome that Sanjay Dixit, Vijay Sardana, even Ajit Bharti exist.
Sending you this
old deep state.
I'm sending you this piece. ये अप्रैल मैं आपको व्हाट्सएप पे भेज रहा हूँ। ये ना अप्रैल 2024 में लिखा गया था। ये एक किस्म से टेम्पलेट था जिसके बेसिस पे ये सब अटैक शुरू हुए। Imagine this, 2024. ठीक। And he made essentially all the points which the left used. ये 100% एक लेफ्ट इंस्पायर्ड अटैक है। वो अब कर रहे हैं डिवाइड एंड रूल, जो वो हमेशा करते आ रहे हैं। करने दीजिए, हमारा क्या जाता है। मेरा मानना है ये बेहतर है कि ये लॉरा लूमर जैसे लूनी लोग बाहर आके खुद को अपना दिखा दें ताकि हमको पता चले कि कौन दुश्मन है, रादर देन चुप रह के एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में हो और हमको पता ही ना चले कौन हमारे खिलाफ ये कर रहा है।
देखो अब 4 साल में तो ये पूरा जो डेमोक्रेटिक स्टैब्लिशमेंट था इसने इंडिया को तो पूरा ट्राई किया है। बांग्लादेश वाला पूरा है, जो कुछ भी किया गया है, दैट इज द टारगेट इज इंडिया, इज नॉट बांग्लादेश। बांग्लादेश कहाँ मैटर करता है, दैट गेटिंग नॉर्मलाइज्ड।
आसान सी चीज है, प्रोडक्शन सप्लाई प्रॉब्लम है, ये उसी टाइम साइनिंग के टाइम ही साफ ओके।
हाउ डू यू सी दैट गोइंग फॉरवर्ड ड्यूरिंग ट्रम्प 2.0? उनका कहना है कि साहब ये ट्रम्प जो है वो हमारे ऊपर टैरिफ लगा देगा एंड आवर
But see, we knew this. You
our
can't
economy
give
would be
everything you
impacted.
want. Let's be very clear about this. He is the president of America. He's not the president of India.
That's right.
He's not going to do everything you want. टैरिफ वो लगाएगा, ठीक है, टैरिफ वो लगाएगा, बिल्कुल लगाएगा,
लेकिन दूसरे पंगे नहीं करेगा।
पर दूसरे पंगे नहीं करेगा। Now you decide
I'm so glad Sanjay Dixit gets this.
what you want. सब कुछ जो हम ही बोलते हैं भाई, we are not the presidents of America, समझ रहे हो ना? It's that simple. So you will win some, you will lose some. Point is ये confrontational hostile relationship नहीं होगा जहां आपके और नॉर्थ कोरिया के बीच में कोई डिफरेंस नहीं देखा जाए और आपको ताना
सोरोस को अवार्ड मिलने के
I want to show you all a specific spot. I'm still looking for it. Wait, okay.
बाद और 20 तारीख को ट्रम्प के आने के बाद
2029 में भारी बहुमत से, 2/3 बहुमत से नहीं, 4/5 बहुमत से प्रधानमंत्री बनेंगे।
I mean, may your prediction go the way of all your previous predictions?
Yes.
Yeah, seriously, what do you think, guys? Because वो तो पूरी तरह से he makes no bones about it.
हुआ था 2024 में, ये ब्लैक स्वॉन इवेंट, नंबर बिल्कुल सही प्रेडिक्ट किया था, कई सारे ये गलती फिर से नहीं करेंगे।
राहुल गांधी बचा पा रहे हैं, वो राहुल गांधी को बचाने हैं।
नहीं तो फिर वही उस आप ये मैं स्क्रीन शेयर कर, वो वाहियात इंसान है और एक वाहियात खानदान से उसने रिश्ता जोड़ रखा है जो सब लिब्रांडों को पैसा देता है, जब सूट कर नहीं देख सकते। यू डोंट इवन हैव टू कनेक्ट, इफ यू बाय अ टीवी उस पे जो आप ये लगाओगे ना नेटफ्लिक्स और उन सबको निकाल दिया गया। और अब क्या हो रहा है, ट्रम्प डजंट वांट टू एसोसिएट विद देम करके रखा है। बाइडेन भी कमला को हेट करता ही, ये सबके सबको निकाला जाएगा स्पेस ऑफ जस्ट 6 months।
और आपका मित्र जो है वो खबर चीमा, वो कहता है कि वो बोलते हैं शरीयत शरीयत शरीयत, बट दे डू नॉट बिलीव।
Maybe discuss this in the latest one. Let me just check here as well, okay? Not in this one. Wait, एक मिनट रुको, ठीक है? एक बहुत important
थे, पूछिए सर।
नहीं, मैं ये पूछ रहा था कि ये जो है
को से सीखना चाहिए।
बाइबल, हालेलुया
हालेलुया, गॉड that made very little difference between the Republicans and Democrats on everything. So understand, in order to get into MAGA, कोई integrated operational system चाहिए, NATO standard weapons, doesn't have to be American but NATO standard
से दोनों एलिमेंट्स प्ले कर रहे थे इसमें। कोविड
ओपन सोर्स करते हो ये सब, आप अभी ओपन एआई पूछा, मल्टीपोलर एंड फोकसिंग इनवर्ड्स, ये देखिए अमेरिका इतना बड़ा है और ट्रंप का
विद सिस्टर एम। अरे कुछ छोड़ा आपने। नेक्स्ट नाम लॉजिकल ईशान, सैम,
कितनी बड़ी गाली दी आपने।
पेट्रोडा टू इंक्लूड
company, he owns about 200 patents. So
minutes उसी में आ गया ये। प्रीतम, जमात कटर रवि पुट प्रेशर थ्रू यूके
कि Hindus actually behave like that. अब मैं क्या करूं?
next
This is Michelle.
I know.
Because
तो मैं पूछ रहा हूँ ना, इनको पता होगा ना प्रेस एंटी इंडिया, उसका क्या मतलब है मेरे समझ में नहीं आया.
Yeah, Paul. Which I think is very promising. And fusion reactors, maybe we're about 20-30 years away still. Fusion is a very tough technology.
them fund campaign लीजिए, डेमोक्रेट बन जाइए, insert our guys in their team. बाद में
very high.
उन्होंने ट्रंप ने कनाडा को अपनी जगह पे बैठा दिया. जो कंट्री एनबीए और नेशनल हॉकी
AMNSD request your thoughts on if we should have a central body to take over from municipal bodies of metro cities so that they can have uniform standards and efficient infra development.
आपने वो भी नहीं किया. So what is the point? You blame everybody else for your
change things that America becomes great again because he recognizes कि आज की तारीख में जिस तरह से.
Okay. Next, skeleton master killer.
Imagine thinking.
Bible, hallelujah.
Hallelujah. God, ये इसकी औकात क्या है?
मैं अभी उसका इनवाइट भेजता हूँ.
हाँ, मैं अभी उसका कांटेक्ट आपको दे देता हूँ. और क्या होगा कि आप तो बाबू हैं, आपके सब बाबू
यहीं पे मिलेगा.
वो ना पाकिस्तान के सुब्रमण्यम है.
बॉम्ब एक्सप्लोजन होगा.
मैंने कुछ नहीं बोला. मैंने बोला इट इज सच अ डेंजरस कंट्री, यू डोंट नो इफ यू गो इन इफ यू विल कम आउट अलाइव. तो एनीबॉडी गोइंग इन पाकिस्तान
थोड़ी परेशान है अभी इन
द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स.
बट शुरू कर दिया आपने, सैंक्शन लगाना शुरू कर दिया. तो व्हाई वुड अभिजीत को करने का उनको उन दोनों ही को करना पड़ेगा. मोदी जी को ये कदम करना पड़ेगा, चाहे या ना चाहे.
were very pro India when it came to defense deals at least. जो ऑस्टिन था डिफेंस सेक्रेटरी और जो NSA था.
बात एक ये हो रही है जो देख रहे हैं, जो न्यूज़पेपर्स पे
हम सब जानते हैं मार्केट तो वैसे मूव होता है, यू नो, ट्रम्प्स पॉलिसी मेकिंग.
और बताइए साहब,
इस जो ट्रम्प का सोच विचार है ना, आर्ट ऑफ द डील एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट, वो पहली मोहम्मद यूनिस जो है क्या करेगा बांग्लादेश? हमको बस चुपचाप बैठ के उस सेरेमनी में आई फर्स्ट उधर. नाउ व्हाट इज स्टॉपिंग यू फ्रॉम सेंडिंग देम ऑल बैक? व्हाई आरंट यू डूइंग इट नाउ? राइट.
कहाँ किया?
मैं इंतजार कर रहा हूँ.
पूरा का पूरा
सोशल प्रॉमिसेस थे वो तो ट्रम्प ने ये कर लिया.
The part about Sanatan economics guy, okay? Both these episodes had a significant section on that topic. Let me just check the Q&A session of this one.
पर जिन लोगों ने अमेरिका को डिफीट किया है, आपको लगता है वो पाकिस्तान से कोई डरने वाले हैं? वो वापस चले जाएंगे.
वो तो जो उनका जो इस्लामिक क्रेडो है, लाइफ स्टार्ट्स आफ्टर डेथ, दे एक्चुअली लिव जेडी बैक इन 2023. और उसके बाद देखेंगे
यूएस डॉलर.
हाँ, मिल गया.
पर्सनल विद यू.
लॉक स्टॉक बैरल, do anything.
Anyway, but that at least has revived the right in the Britain. थोड़ा उनका तो मोरल तो हाई हुआ है. आइए चलते हैं, थोड़ा क्वेश्चंस वगैरह ले लेते हैं. A lot of questions today because Father George Soros has come to Jaipur Dialogues after a long time, so there are a lot of questions. So पहला question, Balaji, and this is very personal with you. I take both the questions together. Sanjay ji, when are you inviting Ankit ji on JD? Not any. I don't think very soon. Certainly not. Post dollar reaching rupees 65. इसको पहुंचने दीजिए as per his prediction. It was given as JD back in 2023. उसके बाद देखेंगे.
US dollar.
Second question relates to you.
No, one second. Why is 65 kahan? It was 83, it's now gone up to 85. We are in the first quarter of 2025, Balaji. We are not in the last quarter of 2025.
हाँ तो जब आ जाएगा लास्ट क्वार्टर में 65 तो ही तो बुलाएंगे ना. आ जाएगा तो जरूर बुला लेंगे. 100% guaranteed. If rupee reaches 65 in the last quarter, this is मुझे उठाए प्रण कीन, मैं प्रण कर रहा हूँ. यदि 65 आ जाता है लास्ट क्वार्टर में तो हम तुरंत अंकित जी को बुलाएंगे यहाँ पर और उनको फूल मालाओं से उनका स्वागत करेंगे. और अगर 2030 में 3 रुपए पे आ जाता है तब तो हम सब उनके गुलाम हो जाएंगे.
हाँ, मैं अपना प्रॉपर्टी उनके नाम कर दूंगा.
हाँ ठीक है, डन. बालाजी कह रहे हैं संजय जी, AIM took the debate below the belt, saying naked oil wrestling. If it was a genuine debate invitation, Dr. Shah would have participated.
Do you know how much Jaipur Dialogues asked him to take part in a one-on-one debate with me? He refused to even be on the same panel.
Yes, it was his condition that he would come to Jaipur Dialogues only and only if he was not in the same panel.
To enjoy.
Rahul Rathod, your views?
So again, Sanjay Dixit, his generation also saying these things is a very nice thing. I'm going to come back at 11:30, but before that, for the final thing in final part of this live stream, thanks Rishi for pointing this out. Let's check out what's going on. Swarajya has just done a coverage of this topic. India gears up for labor code rollout, rules likely to be finalized by 31st March. का हमरे सपने सच होंगे? India is set to take a significant step towards labor reforms, with the labor code rules expected to be finalized by 31st March, setting the stage for the possible implementation of the 4 labor codes from 1st April, reported The Hindu. A high-level meeting of Union and State Labor Ministry officials reviewed the progress in drafting rules under the codes, signaling the final phase of the long-awaited labor law overhaul. The meeting highlighted that over 18 states and union territories have already implemented a majority of the reforms, while more than 32 states and union territories have pre-published draft rules. The remaining states and union territories have shown satisfactory progress, and all 36 states and union territories are expected to complete the pre-publication of harmonized draft rules by 31st March, ensuring nationwide compliance with the labor codes. The 2-day meeting, chaired by Union Labour Minister Mansukh Mandavia, also focused on broader labour reforms, including gig and platform worker policies. The minister emphasized the need to strike a balance between workers' welfare and industrial growth, urging states and union territories to share best practices on labour reforms. He also highlighted government efforts to match labour market demand with supply, leveraging initiatives like the National Career Service (NCS) portal and Model Career Centers (MCCs) to boost employment opportunities. During the meeting, the minister launched state and union territory microsites under the eShram initiative and the Occupational Shortage Index (OSI). The eShram microsites, seamlessly integrated with the National eShram database, will simplify the registration process for unorganized workers. Meanwhile, OSI aims to analyze labor market trends, helping policymakers and employers identify skill shortages and align job seekers' skills with industry needs, thereby enhancing employment outcomes across the country. Nice. So, see you guys at 11:30 discussing Vad's podcast. Thank you guys. Bye-bye. See you in 10 minutes.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে আপন বুকের পাঁজর চালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো।